Our guest today is Hilary Mantel, the author of the award-winning books Wolf Hall and Bring Up the Bodies. Those books have now been adapted into a new stage show on Broadway, a two-parter, and also into a miniseries on PBS. Hilary, thanks for coming to the Wall Street Journal.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, of course, the chief protagonist of your book, Wolf Hall, and the sequel, Bring Up the Bodies, is Thomas Cromwell, chief minister to Henry VIII, a man who, of course, had a very tumultuous romantic life. But one question I have for you is, what about Thomas Cromwell and his career as chief minister to Henry VIII speaks to today? What about this story still has resonance today?
Thomas Cromwell was a blacksmith's son. So in this country where basically government was done by the king and by lords, by people with titles, by ancient families, he crashed right through the social structure to become the king's right-hand man. Now, what drove my curiosity was, how did he do this? What kind of man did he need to be? And the answer is smart and audacious and far-seeing, a visionary, but an effective visionary who could take care of the details and operate pragmatically in the real world. A lesson for all politicians, though all politicians should avoid trying to get their heads cut off at the end of the day.
Did at any time during your research did it get too dark to be living in these really Machiavellian man's world where women were disposed of and treated, valued for their ability to produce a male heir? Even though Anne Boleyn is such a strong character, they're trying to manipulate everyone for Henry's needs, and it's...
Sure, I mean, you've got to be realistic about this. The women, they're cannon fodder. They're wombs on legs, as far as Henry's concerned.
Wow.
They are strong women. Henry was involved in the shape of his first wife and his second wife with two of the most intelligent women in Europe and very strong-minded. But it was the men who were writing the rule book. And, you have to embrace that. You can't make them into proto-feminists. You can't make them into something they're not. And the harshness of the world for women, the unfairness of it is, in some ways it's at the core of the story, because Henry has brilliant men about him, but only a woman can give him the thing he really wants. But then there is a price to be paid.
But I love the fact that despite all of his best efforts, who was his successor? A woman.
Well, no, his successor was his son. He did have a son.
But then, how long did he rule?
Well, Edward came to the throne at the age of 9 and he died at the age of 16. There was then the short and disastrous reign of Henry's daughter Mary.
Right.
And the longer, much more memorable reign of his second daughter, Elizabeth, his child by Anne Boleyn. But you see, in those days there were good reasons for thinking that a woman would not rule successfully, because kings led their armies in battle. And the question back in the 16th century was, how will a woman do this? So in many ways, what Henry was trying to do was perfectly sane and logical. He just had a slightly insane and costly way of going about it.
Now, this is a fascinating tale that you've now told it 3 different ways, with your books, with the miniseries, now with the stage plays. In what ways does the medium change the message? Do you find that you have to tell a story a different way in novels versus on stage or versus on television?
All the people I've been working with have been concerned to preserve the integrity of the history. And they've believed, like me, that there isn't a necessary divide between good history and good drama. So this was a conscious choice. Those were the people I wanted to work with. And then you look at what are the strengths of the medium. On TV, we've been able to open up these gorgeous locations. The TV series is entirely set on location and entirely by natural light or candlelight, which is a brilliant evocation of the 16th century world. On stage, we can do something different. we can pin you to the moment. You can watch a live encounter between two human beings who, in that moment, are negotiating their situation. I think both versions, they enhance the books.
Now, of course, this is a historical tale grounded in history, but is there something about the way in which he helped run Henry VIII's kingdom that people today could learn from, today's politicians could draw something useful from?
Cromwell had the kind of genius brain that I think is probably born, not made. But he also had a cast iron work ethic. Henry was a full-time job and he was seldom off duty. I think the responsibility in those days, of course, was to king and country, not so much to people. But he was someone who bore the people in mind as the origin and fount of the king's power. I think, therefore, he would have made a successful politician in the modern era, and he would have been a media genius, I'm convinced of that. We think it was a slow old world where things happened in a leisurely way, but we describe in the novels and the other versions the illnesses, the epidemics, the summer epidemics that rip through London. You're well at breakfast and by dinner time you're dead. And this happens to Cromwell's wife and two of his children. And the speed with which events move.
But some critics have said that you've turned that event of his family's death into a way to have people sympathize with him and make him, and your portrayal of him is a little more positive than some historians have had.
So they think we should not sympathize with a man who loses his wife one year and his daughters the next. It's a very strange viewpoint.
But turning him into the protagonist of the story and Thomas More into the antagonist is unusual.
They have a rather naive view of history and Tudor scholarship. Thomas Cromwell's centrality has been well established for 30 years. Of course, people get upset when you challenge their version, when you challenge their pieties, when you challenge the version they grew up with. But I think, proper Tudor historians know the score. I'm not in unknown territory here. We all work over the same sources. And then there is the question of interpretation. Now, if you're grounded in the sources and the evidence, you are entitled to your interpretation and your opinion. I think that there is a certain amount of hypocrisy, certainly surrounding the Thomas More controversy. He was not a 1960s liberal, as portrayed in A Man for All Seasons. He was proud of his hunting down of his intellectual opponents, of his persecution of them. He was not a man, not a hero for our time. The Catholic Church has made him acceptable by making him into a martyr for individual conscience, a cause, believe me, he would not have recognized as valid. He was a martyr for his obedience to the papacy, to the Roman Catholic Church. Cromwell was a ruthless man. I make no bones about that. I've not whitewashed him. What I've tried to do is get behind his eyes and say to my reader and my audiences, right, tell me what you would do.
Well, Hilary Mantel, thanks a lot for coming to the Wall Street Journal.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.